Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees. Tonight's top story. A 25-year-old man from North London has been charged with the murder of Sir David Amess as the Home Secretary raises the terrorism threat level for MPs. Also tonight, Britain agrees a free trade deal with New Zealand. The government hopes the deal is a step to joining the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, but it's left British farmers worried. And the UK and Australia defend their nuclear submarine deal with the United States, saying fears over the deal have been exaggerated.
The USA, UK and Australia have come together to confront emerging threats.
A man has been charged in connection with the stabbing of Sir David Amess. The Conservative MP was killed as he met constituents at a church hall last week.
Ali Harbi Ali, aged 25 and from North London, has been charged with murder and the preparation of terrorist acts contrary to Section 5 of the Terrorism Act 2006.
Authorities say the British man with Somali heritage would appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on Thursday afternoon. Police say there have been no other arrests and they are not seeking anybody else in relation to the incident. The death of Sir David has prompted conversations at the highest levels about how the country protects its leaders and grapples with extremism at home. Home Secretary Priti Patel announced on Wednesday that the terrorism threat level to members of Parliament has been raised from moderate to substantial following an independent review. In other news, the UK and New Zealand have agreed in principle on a free trade agreement after a late-night video conference call between Prime Ministers Boris Johnson and Jacinda Ardern. Tariffs on 97% of products will be eliminated. The government hopes the deal will help the UK's effort to join the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership. But British farmers are concerned over beef and sheep meat from New Zealand being even cheaper to the UK market. NTD's Al Rhodes brings us the story.
The UK and New Zealand agreed in principle on a free trade deal to reduce tariffs and improve services trade. Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Jacinda Ardern sealed the deal in a Zoom call Wednesday night after 16 months of negotiation.
It's part of our vision in the UK, as you know, Jacinda, to deepen our ties with the Indo-Pacific region, particularly with New Zealand. Our whole Indo-Pacific tilt is in your direction, and we see this deal as a big part of that. So thank you very much to you and all your team for all your efforts.
Ardern says the deal will eliminate tariffs on 97% of products for both countries. New Zealand estimates its businesses will save £20 million per year.
The United Kingdom and New Zealand are great friends, close partners and fierce sporting rivals, of course. The historical connections that bind us run deep. This world-leading free trade agreement we are now on the verge of concluding will lay the foundations for even stronger connections in the future. This serves New Zealand well as we reconnect, rebuild and recover from COVID-19.
The UK International Development Secretary says the deal will make it easier for small businesses, lawyers and architects to access New Zealand. And products such as Manuka honey and kiwi fruit will be more affordable.
The new agreement in principle means existing tariffs as high as 10% will be removed on a huge range of UK goods, from shoes to ships, from buses to bulldozers, giving British exporters an advantage over international rivals in the New Zealand import market, expected to grow by 30% by 2030.
Although New Zealand accounts for only 0.2% of the UK's trade, the government hopes it will open the door to membership in the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership. This has emerged as a top trade aim after the prospects of a US deal faded. Britain is hoping to become a member by the end of next year.
A UK-New Zealand free trade agreement will be another major trade deal, like our agreement with Australia, so this marks a significant step towards the UK's aim to join the £8.4 trillion CPTPP free trade area.
Under the Trade Pact, tariffs on dairy products will be gradually eliminated after 5 years. It gives Brits significantly more access to New Zealand's meat, and all tariffs will be eliminated after 15 years, upsetting British farmers. The National Farmers Union says the deal could damage the viability of many British farms in the years ahead, to the detriment of the public, who want more British food on their shelves. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
The UK and Australia defend their nuclear submarine deal with the US. The UK's Armed Forces Minister saying there's been a lot of overhyping around the deal, which is known as AUKUS. The agreement between the three countries is widely seen as a way to help deter the Chinese Communist Party's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific. We've got more from NTD's Jane Well.
Often referred to as a way to stop Beijing from dominating the Indo-Pacific, the nuclear submarine deal between the UK, US and Australia hasn't been without controversy. It initially sparked backlash from Paris after Canberra backed out of a submarine deal with France. But speaking via video conference on Thursday in Kuala Lumpur, the UK's Minister for Armed Forces said fears over the deal have been exaggerated.
There has been a lot of sort of overhyping of AUKUS. It doesn't in any way reflect any sort of reduction in our friendship with our great colleagues and allies in Paris. It doesn't in any way represent a challenge in your part of the world.
The Australian Defence Minister says it's not a defence alliance or a security pact and doesn't change Australia's defence strategy. It means Australia will, for the first time, have technology for nuclear-powered submarines. It comes as MPs debated the implications of AUKUS on UK-China relations on Wednesday, initiated by MP Daniel Kavinsky.
The USA, UK and Australia have come together to confront emerging threats. So it was the three of us that had to intervene during the Second World War to prevent the Japanese Empire from causing chaos and instability in the region. And now again, I'm afraid, it's those three countries who have to come together in advance of seeing the threat of the Chinese hurtling towards us and other important countries.
The Labour Party supports the agreement.
AUKUS is not about provoking China. It is about deepening cooperation between like-minded allies who share a commitment to each other's security and a vision of a peaceful and open Indo-Pacific region.
In response to the debate, the Foreign Minister said that the AUKUS deal will help support stability and peace in the Indo-Pacific region, and she also said that China's increasing assertiveness and power will likely become one of the most significant geopolitical factors in the 2020s. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
With COP26 climate change conference approaching, the government has secured nearly £10 billion for green investments at the recent Global Investment Summit. Ministers have announced goals and strategies to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. NTD's Malcolm Hudson takes a broad look at Britain's electricity infrastructure and what would have to change to meet these goals.
The government is guiding energy infrastructure away from fossil fuels towards renewables as part of its net zero goal. This will see oil, gas and coal stations decommissioned, with focus shifting to wind, solar and biomass. Other goals include ending sales of new petrol and diesel cars by 2030 and no longer installing new gas boilers from 2035. Instead, electric heat pumps will be used to heat houses. Heat pumps are new to the UK, but are already widely used throughout Europe. They work in a similar way to a fridge, drawing heat in from one area and expelling it to another. They source heat from either the ground or the air.
The policies and spending brought forward in the strategy, along with regulations, will leverage up to £90 billion of private investment by 2030, levelling up our former industrial heartlands. It also clearly highlights the steps we as a government are taking to work with industry to bring down the costs of key technology.
Shifting to electric cars and heat pumps is projected to double UK electricity consumption by 2050. Current infrastructure has yet to match the coming demand. Concerns have been raised over whether the grid can handle it without blackouts. The Department for Transport proposed turning off smart vehicle chargers during peak periods. Another technology being developed is vehicle-to-grid charging. Electricity will be drawn from cars to support the grid during times of high demand. An industry expert says that if we don't adopt technologies like these, the grid may collapse. National Grid says that it is confident it will have new infrastructure running in time to meet demand. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
A professor from Edinburgh Napier University has pioneered a way to change whisky production waste into biofuel through a traditional fermentation process. He says biofuel can replace petrol in most traditional cars without any modification. Ahead of the UN Climate Summit in Scotland, he's calling for investment for mass production. NTD's Eddie Aiken has the story.
Whisky production, one of Scotland's most important industries, could soon fuel the country's economy in more than one way. A Scottish company is turning the leftover waste from whisky making into everyday chemicals that are usually refined from oil. The biofuel produced by Professor Martin Tangney's company, Celtic Renewables, can be used as a direct replacement for the petrol in cars.
So we at Celtic Renewables are pioneering a process whereby we can take residues from industries such as the whisky industry and convert them into high-value products, namely butanol, which is actually being used to power this car right now.
Whisky is made from barley, yeast and water, and leaves behind spent barley grains known as draff, and a sugary water called pot ale. The waste is often disposed of as an animal feed or even pumped into the sea. The process of converting the waste produces common chemicals that are used in everything from fuel and food production to medicine and cosmetics. Tangney says these chemicals could be used long into the future if they are produced in a sustainable way.
This is made from living carbon, essentially. It's from a residues of an industry that's one of the most important industries in the Scottish economy, and we can take their residues and turn them into something that we need right now, made from sustainable resources.
The fermentation process Celtic Renewables is reviving used to be a huge global industry, but finally shut down because of competition from petrochemicals and the cost of raw materials. Tangney says with their patented process, this company can use organic waste rather than high-value crops.
At Celtic Renewables, we've taken a biotechnology process that was developed 100 years ago to make the chemicals acetone, butanol and ethanol, ABE fermentation, and we've revived it for a modern world to make sustainable chemicals using low-value wastes and residues as our raw material.
The demonstration plant in Grangemouth can produce 1 million litres of advanced sustainable biochemicals from 50,000 tonnes of draff and pot ale and other raw materials such as potatoes or almost any organic waste. Just days before Glasgow welcomes leaders from around the world to the United Nations Climate Summit, COP26, Tangney is calling for action.
This has to be the COP where we stop talking about why we need to tackle climate change and tell everybody how we do it, how we pay for it, how is it going to happen, a roadmap, a strategy, not an exercise in target setting.
Tangney's company now plans to build 5 large-scale refineries around the world in the next 5 years and is calling on governments and investors to back them. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Royal Mint says it's planning to build a plant that could reclaim hundreds of kilograms of gold and other precious metals from electronic waste such as mobile phones and laptops. Gold and silver are highly conductive and small quantities are embedded in circuit boards and other hardware along with other precious metals. Most of this material is never recovered, with discarded electronics often dumped into landfill or incinerated. Royal Mint says it has partnered with a Canadian startup which has developed chemical solutions to extract metals from the circuit boards. The solutions can extract gold in seconds and turn it into a gold-rich liquid. Then, using precipitation, the gold can be recovered from the liquid. The Mint's Chief Growth Officer Sean Millard says the process is currently used at small scale and the new plant in Wales should be up and running within the next couple of years. Still to come, authorities in Bavaria investigate millions of pounds in sales tax fraud by Italy's most powerful criminal group. Police raided a luxury car dealership, confiscated Lamborghinis belonging to the Mafia. That and more after the break. Former US President Donald Trump plans to launch his own social media app called Truth Social. He says it will stand up to big tech companies such as Twitter and Facebook that have barred him from their platforms for months. In a press release on Wednesday, he said his new app is being created to fight back against the big tech companies of Silicon Valley, which he says silences opposing voices in America. Trump was banned from several social networks following the mass demonstration at Capitol Hill in January. A beta version of Truth Social is expected to be available to invited guests next month. And Trump says in the future he intends to launch a streaming service featuring non-woke entertainment programming, as well as a cloud service to rival Google and Amazon. In other news, the Polish Prime Minister on Thursday defended his nation before a meeting of fellow leaders in Brussels. This comes after Poland's Constitutional Court questions the supremacy of EU law. He said Poland will not bow to EU blackmail, but will seek to solve ongoing disputes. While several member states are keen to punish Warsaw, Germany warns of isolating Poland. We hear more from NTD's Anna Rodriguez.
EU leaders meet in Brussels for a two-day summit. They were set to discuss urgent topics like energy prices, climate change, migration and COVID-19. But a dispute with Poland will likely dominate the gathering. 2 weeks ago, Poland's highest court ruled that elements of EU law were incompatible with the country's constitution. Poland's Prime Minister on Thursday in Brussels said his country is willing to follow EU law but opposed the power grab from Brussels.
Some European institutions assume the right to decide on matters that have not been assigned to them. They assume competencies which have not been handed over to them in the treaties.
In challenging a central tenet of EU integration, that EU law trumps national decision-making, the case risks a fundamental crisis for the bloc. In response, the EU Commission has barred Warsaw from tapping into almost £50 billion of COVID-19 emergency funds. Warsaw also risks more penalties from the bloc's top court.
That's why we will not act under the pressure of blackmail. We are ready for dialogue. We do not agree to the ever-expanding competencies, but we will of course talk about how to resolve the current dispute with understanding and dialogue.
While several member states are keen to bring Warsaw into line, the German Chancellor warns of isolating Poland.
Rule of law is a core aspect of the European Union. At the same time, we have to find ways of coming back together, because a cascade of cases at the European Court is not a solution.
It was a power play between a nation and the EU that also set Britain on course for Brexit. But Poland has dismissed the idea of leaving the EU in a Polexit. Anna Rodriguez, NTD News.
German police confiscated several luxury vehicles as part of a Europe-wide Mafia probe at a car dealer in Bavaria on Wednesday. Police say they were investigating a massive sales tax fraud committed by members of the Ndrangheta, one of the largest organized crime groups in the world. This report comes from NTD's Eddie Aiken.
Police in Germany seized luxury cars with a combined value of over £800,000. The cars were confiscated at a dealership in Upper Bavaria. Some belong to the Ndrangheta, the most powerful mafia group in Italy.
We confiscated several high-quality vehicles here, and we believe with this type of car, a massive sales tax fraud was committed. We're talking about damages amounting to at least €13 million.
Among the cars is a low-mileage yellow Lamborghini Urus with an asking price of £290,000.
The system is known as a sales tax carousel. Different companies sell high-quality cars back and forth across Europe, and in the end, the sales tax is reclaimed, which was never paid in the first place. By the time the fraud becomes apparent, the companies have disappeared or the traces are lost.
Police raids also took place in Italy and Bulgaria, as part of a Europe-wide investigation.
These vehicles will now be sold as quickly as possible to get some of the money back to the state in order to somewhat minimize the damages incurred by this sales tax fraud.
Stellen uns so diesen eingetretenen Steuerschaden, den die Täter verursacht haben, etwas zu minimieren.
The 'Ndrangheta is based in the southern region of Calabria. Their notoriety has surpassed Sicily's most famous Cosa Nostra to become one of the largest organised crime groups in the world. The criminal organisation is accused of tax evasion worth millions of pounds. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Staying in Germany, the president of the Bundesbank will step down more than 5 years early. He was a relentless critic of the European Central Bank's ultra-easy monetary policy. His departure removes a key fiscally conservative voice from the bank's governing council. NTD's Joanne Robson has more on this.
Bundesbank President Jens Weidmann said he will leave the office at the end of the year for personal reasons. National central bank governors in the 19-country Eurozone have a seat on the European Central Bank's governing council. In that position, Weidmann has been the chief sceptic of expansive stimulus policies, such as bond purchases, a step the bank has undertaken to drive down long-term interest rates and support growth. The next German government will nominate his successor. It could pick a less confrontational one, but the party leader of the pro-business Free Democrats that are in coalition talks with 2 other parties urges not to change course at the Bundesbank.
The Bundesbank must continue to be the advocate of a stability-oriented money policy in Europe. We now see inflation risks in Europe.
Weidmann also warned in his farewell letter that the ECB should not lose sight of the risk that prices might rise too fast. He was among a handful of policymakers that opposed the bank's pledge to keep interest rates at record lows. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
And now to Poland. Ever wondered what food and drinks actually tasted like hundreds of years ago? Well, one Polish historian is trying to recreate a medieval-style beer with an unusual ingredient. NTD's Joanne Robson brings us this report.
A Polish historian has recreated a medieval beer recipe using yeast from Krakow's historic cellars. He thought of bringing the medieval white beer back to life in 2016 and just brewed his first pint.
We're making this for the first time in about 170 years. It has been about 178 years since the last documented batch of the white Krakow beer. So nobody can tell us what the brewing process was back then and how the beer tasted. There is nobody alive who has drunk such beer in Krakow.
Krakow's white beer was widely consumed from the Middle Ages up until the 18th century. Dria collected the hibernated yeast from sediments found in cellars once used for beer fermentation. The breakthrough moment was cooperation with microbiologists. They were able to create a live brewer's yeast culture from the collected samples.
We do our part of the work by creating a material for the yeast so that it can work on it. And then for 3-4 weeks the yeast is working. We can't help it or disturb it. The most important thing is not to disturb it so that it can do everything in peace. So it needs a proper temperature, proper pressure, and cleanliness, cleanliness, cleanliness.
The first batch has to age for about 4 weeks before it's ready. Afterwards, researchers from Krakow's Agriculture University will study its sugar, protein and vitamin content for comparison to modern beers. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
And finally, Paris saw a defence showcase this week for the future of warfare technology. Among the exhibits was a robotic dock, which could be used for military interventions. We hear more from NTD's France correspondent, David Amess.
What if this four-legged machine is the biggest asset for militaries on the battlefield? These so-called robo-dogs stole the limelight at the Milipol Defense and Security Trade Fair near Paris on Tuesday. This is Ghost Robotics Vision 60. Though it might not answer if you call its name, it has advanced functions, such as a sensor, the ability to keep its balance on difficult terrain, and a battery that allows it to walk continuously for 3 hours.
It really can be used to save lives, so in dangerous situations where you need to enter a building and there's an unknown threat in the building, better to put the robot in to go first, to inspect, do some reconnaissance.
The robot can also be remote controlled, carry rifles on its back, and participate on the battlefield. It can operate in contaminated areas or do anything a human would find boring.
All of the dull, dirty and dangerous situations.
The 22nd edition of Milipol Paris takes place from October 19th to 22nd and plays host to dozens of countries, including Israel, United States and Switzerland.
That's the news for today. Have a good evening. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.